Good morning. We'll call the today's Board of Commissioners meeting to order. For the public, there's a copy of the Open Meetings Act on the north wall of the legislative chambers. I'd also like to note for the public that there is a automatic external defibrillator available in the back of the room if needed, and we'll ask if you can to silence or turn off your cell phones. With that, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the sake of time, for the people in the audience, we should be able to move through this pretty quick to put you on your way. We're going to begin with the Board of Commissioners meeting first, and we'll go for roll call.
Commissioner Borgeson. Here. Commissioner Boyle. Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh. Here. Commissioner Buda. Here. Commissioner Kraft. Commissioner Morgan. Here. Mr. Chair.
Here. We do item 1, minutes and claims, A and B, approval of the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held Tuesday, May 8th, 2018, and B, approval of claims submitted for payment processed through Tuesday, May 29th, 2018. It's the will of the board.
Motion approved. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Boyle, second by Commissioner Duda. Please vote.
I've abstained because there's a check to my company.
Okay.
Motion passes. Just a weekly reminder that Commissioner Boyle's vote won't appear, but he did vote yes. Commissioner Morgan abstained. He stated the reasons, and everyone else voting yes. Motion passes.
Okay. So, so everybody knows where we're going. We're going to item 3, recognitions and proclamations. Then we'll recess and go back to the Board of Equalization. Item 3, recognition and proclamations. Item A is the resolution recognizing the El Museo Latino and its founding director, Magdalena A. Garcia, for 25 years of honoring Latino traditions and culture in Douglas County. I'll turn over to Commissioner Boyle.
Magdalena?
Please step to the podium, and then we'll grill you when we get through. No, kind of step to the middle there by the microphones. This is the proclamation. Whereas on May 5, 1993, El Museo Latino opened in the historic Livestock Exchange Building as the first Latino art and history museum in Nebraska. And whereas the vision of the founding executive director, Magdalena Garcia, and the board of directors was to bring local, national, and international Latino art to Omaha, while showcasing local Latino artists, delivering art education programs in the visual and performing arts, and celebrating Latino traditions and culture through special events. And whereas from 1993 until 1997, El Museo Latino expanded, and its exhibitions, programs, and events attracted increased attention and visitor traffic, resulting in a move to its current location at 4701 South 25th Street. And whereas since its founding, the museum has presented over 200 temporary and permanent exhibitions, developed and offered educational programs that include bilingual museum tours, classes in the visual and performing arts, and community events highlighting the traditions and celebration of Latinos. It has also established itself as Nebraska's only Latino art and history museum. And whereas each year, El Museo Latino welcomes more than 60,000 visitors to view local, national, and international Latino art, participate in a class or a program, or attend a special performance or community event. Now therefore, be it resolved by this Board of County Commissioners, Douglas County, Nebraska, that this board hereby recognizes El Museo Latino, a cultural beacon of South Omaha, and its founding executive director, Magdalena Garcia, for honoring Latino traditions and culture for 25 years. Dated this 22nd day of May, 2018. And Commissioner Kraft joined with me in sponsoring this resolution. He has a little bit of a sore throat today. I offered to have him read some, but I hogged it all. So very proud of you, Magdalena.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I call for a vote.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Boyle, seconded by Commissioner Kraft. Ms. Garcia, you'd like to say anything?
Yes, I just want to thank you for this honor. It has been a privilege to work in our community. It doesn't seem like 25 years. It seems like a blink, like yesterday. I believe Commissioner DJ Morgan was mayor at the time when we opened. It seems like yesterday, but I truly appreciate this honor, and thank you for the continued support that the Douglas County has provided for the museum. So
Great.
thank you so much.
You bet.
And thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you for what you do.
Well, Mike, hold up. We don't have a board, but I want to make sure nobody else
What's that?
has anything. We don't have a board, so I can't see if anybody else has
Oh.
anything.
All
But
right.
I seen none. Please come forward. I didn't know if somebody wanted to say anything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, we will not. We need to formally vote though.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yep, please.
Would you, Mr. Kraft, Commissioner Kraft, reminded me of the exposition you have now. Perhaps you want to say just a few words about what's going on at the museum now.
Yes, we just opened on May 2nd. The exhibition, Contemporary Textiles. We're featuring the artists from Mérida, Yucatán, Marcela Diaz, and you'll have to come and see it. I mean, you absolutely have to. The textiles she's created are made out of the anique, the cactus fibers, as well as coconut fibers. And it is quite an installation, so please stop in and visit the exhibition. Thank you.
Great. Would you introduce the support you have here today too,
My
please?
support I've had all my life. My mother,
Yes.
Beatriz Garcia, and my one sister, Sylvia. I have total 5 sisters.
Yes,
This is one of
I know
them.
that.
Do you want to state the address so
Yeah.
that the TV or others
The
listening?
address, we're located at 4701 South 25th Street. It was a former Polish home. We've been there since '97. So please stop in during our regular hours, or if you need a special time, just give me a call. I do have a key.
25th and L. And,
25th, it's at the corner of 25th and L.
right. Is there any admission charge?
There is admission charge. General admission is $5, $3 for seniors and students.
Okay, great.
And
But
if
we
I,
do have also free days all the time.
That's
so
great.
Please check it out. And like I said, if it's not during regular hours, I'd be glad to give you a tour.
and if I may say,
Go
Mayor,
ahead. Yes.
the exhibit, you know, how exciting can fabric be? This is fascinating. This is just beyond my imagination. Thank you.
We do have a request for a picture, but if I could, can we vote first?
Yeah.
Let's make sure.
Vote yes. Go on.
We'll go on.
Motion passes, all commissioners voting yes.
Please.
Magdalena comes from a large family. She has a number of sisters, and I have to tell on Anne. We had an event at our house, and so she introduced Maria, is that right? Maria to Magdalena, not knowing they had different surnames. And she introduced them, and of course they said, well, we're sisters. So it was really quite a surprise to Anne when she introduced sisters. But long relationship with this terrific family, and so I'm very proud to be one of the co-sponsors. Congratulations.
Thank you. We'll move on to item B, a resolution declaring September 2nd, 2018 as the National Gun Violence Awareness Day in Douglas County. I'll read this and then comment. Whereas this resolution declares June 2nd to be the National Gun Violence Awareness Day in Douglas County to honor and remember all victims and survivors of gun violence and to declare that we as a country must do more to reduce gun violence. Whereas every day 96 Americans are killed by gun violence and the lives of countless others are injured. And whereas Americans are 25 times more likely to be murdered with guns than people in other developed countries. And whereas beyond the loss of life and the pain and suffering of survivors, there are countless thousands of family members and friends whose lives are forever scarred. And whereas protecting public safety in the communities we serve is the Board of Commissioners' highest responsibility. And whereas support for the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens must be balanced by common sense laws to keep guns away from dangerous people. And whereas June 2nd, 2018, would have been the 21st birthday of Hadiya Pendleton, a teenager who marched in President Obama's second inaugural parade and was tragically shot and killed just weeks later. And whereas the idea was inspired by a group of Hadiya's friends who asked their classmates to commemorate her life by wearing orange, a color hunters wear to announce themselves to other hunters when out in the woods, and because orange is a color that symbolizes the value of human life. And whereas to honor Hadiya and all victims of gun violence, June 2nd was designated as National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And whereas by wearing orange on June 2nd, Americans will raise awareness about gun violence and honor the lives and lost human potential of Americans stolen by gun violence. And whereas we renew our commitment to reduce gun violence and pledge to do all we can to keep firearms out of the wrong hands and encourage responsible gun ownership to help keep our children safe. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Douglas County Board of Commissioners declares June 2nd to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day, dated this 22nd day of May, 2018. Motion by Commissioner Kraft, second by Commissioner Morgan. I can say some on it, but if anybody there wants to, we have people here wearing orange. I was asked by some members of the OIS Steering Committee and some other people in the community to introduce this, not knowing we'd walk into this day after a weekend of another occurrence and our own that we had here. So I'm proud to put the resolution on and hope that people become aware of it. Commissioner Boyle.
I want to thank you all for being here, first of all. And I was reading recently about a young lady, and I wish I could recall her name, but she said she's through offering condolences, and she says we ought to take action. And I couldn't agree more. There's a sensible way to protect our Second Amendment rights, and we need to figure out how to do that. I don't think the forefathers ever anticipated this militia owning atomic weapons, but that's where this could lead, I guess, because there's no restrictions, apparently, or very few. So I really am honored to welcome you here on my behalf. Others, I'm sure, feel the same way. And hopefully this will get resolved when we get our elected representatives to take a stand. Thank you.
Seeing none. Oh, Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly endorse the sentiments in this resolution. The scourge of gun violence, particularly in our schools, is something that we have to take measures to solve. A week or so ago, we had a discussion here with the sheriff about adding security to some of our local schools. It's sad that we have to do this, but it's a necessary precaution. I note that there are certain members of the National Gun Violence Awareness Day group here, and I was just wondering if, in addition to passing resolutions which have no legal force and effect, anybody here from the gun awareness group has practical recommendations that should be taken to deal with the scourge of gun violence and the death of so many of our children needlessly because of the availability of guns in our society. Anything?
Yeah, we'd be happy.
I need you to come here, though.
Sopping wet.
Yep. Just state your name and address.
My name is Naomi Hadaway, and I am here on behalf of Moms Demand Action and the Be Smart program. And like you said, Mr. Kavanaugh, there is so many more things that we can do. Resolutions are great. They bond together everyone's intention, but there's some practical actions that we can take and that we need to start taking The Be Smart program is something that works really well in Nebraska. It's something that we're starting to introduce, and that promotes safe gun ownership. The recent school shooting, the shooter had access to his father's guns because they weren't securely stored. And there's all sorts of different ways that we can come at this problem. It's vast, but we can start. So the Be Smart program is something that all of us are prepared to go into schools, into homes, into different organizations to talk about smart gun ownership, as well as really leaning on our officials and our elected officials to do the right thing when it comes to passing common sense gun laws in Nebraska.
That's great. Could you outline a little bit more what is it SMART?
Be Smart,
Be
yeah.
Smart.
So it's, now I'm blanking on what this SMART stands for, but it's basically promoting conversations around, for instance, those of us that have small children, we go to have play dates and we ask the parents if they have pools or dogs or food allergies, and we don't ask if there's guns in the home or how they're secured. So it's promoting conversations about that. It's also asking people that are gun owners to consider using gun locks or biometric safes. We need to have more conversations about the ways that we can secure our guns. I'm a gun owner, and that's one of the other things that we are promoting with Moms Demand Action, that we are representing people from all sides of the table. It's not just one party who oppose guns and who don't want to respect our Second Amendment.
Right. I think we all recognize the constitutional right to have guns. I'm not sure that too many other countries that do also recognize the right to have guns allow the private possession of assault weapons. Do you have a position on that?
Moms Demand Action, as an organization, supports the ban of AR-15 assault rifles, but they're really focused more on the common sense gun laws around background checks, around closing all the dangerous loopholes that allow people that should be identified as problematic that still have access to the guns. So yeah, I mean, there's different positions on assault type rifles, but we're really more focused on stuff that's a little bit more easy to discuss with our neighbors and with our colleagues
Sure.
in Nebraska.
Well, I commend you for taking action. I got to tell you, with a couple of kids in school, nothing bothers me more each and every day than picking up the paper and seeing that there's another mass shooting in another school.
Yeah.
It's got to stop.
And we all say it won't happen here. And then, communities every day, every weekend, every month are saying it did happen here. And so all of our volunteers are trying to do what we can to help make sure it doesn't happen here.
Well, thank you, and
Sure,
thanks for
thank
your
you.
effort. Keep it up.
Thanks. Thank you.
You got another question?
I'm going to tell a quick little personal story. Back in 1976, my son was about 4 years old. One of our employees owned a gun, strapped it underneath the cash register counter, so it would be readily accessible. Now, I don't remember if the safety was on or off. I have a feeling the safety was off. My son, 4 years old, goes behind the counter, eye height, sees the gun, pulls it out, and starts going bang, bang, bang. That's gun safety. That was not gun safety. The employee thought it was there for protection. I did not know it was there. My father, who owned the store at the time, did not know it was there. How safe was that in the hands of a 4-year-old? I've never owned a gun. My father had a gun until some events happened with a friend and his family and their guns, that he got rid of his gun, and I couldn't even own a BB gun. But yes, by the way, I have orange on. I wasn't aware that orange was the color of today. I would have worn my orange shirt, my orange tie, my orange pants. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we have a Wear Orange event on June 2nd. It's going to be from 7 to 9 p.m. at Columbus Park. And we're bringing together community partners, because the thing that we want to also make sure that everyone is aware of is there are people on the ground in Omaha and the greater Omaha area that are doing work to combat gun violence. So Moms Demand Action is relatively new in Nebraska, But that evening event will really be a place where we can come together with the other organizations in Omaha that are also doing some really good work around gun violence prevention. So we'd love to see
What's the
any
time
of you
and place again?
there. It's between 7 and 9 p.m. And we're excited that the evening will culminate with the Woodman Tower going orange for the weekend.
What's the location?
Columbus Park. So it's, thank you, 1515 South 24th. And it'll be family friendly with activities, and the purpose of it is to honor those that we are no longer with us because of gun violence, and also to celebrate the work that's being done.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe you could do an email to the commissioners
Sure.
about that and the time again,
Absolutely.
and that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate your comments.
Sure. Thanks.
Okay, have we voted? Okay, can we vote, but you gotta, the trade-off, you want a resolution, if somebody wants a picture, you gotta take a picture, so they
Okay.
want a picture.
Absolutely.
Seeing no comments, please vote.
Motion passes, all voting yes.
Those who want to, you can come up front, who's got orange on, we appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm gonna cut in front of you over there.
Squeeze him a little more.
Thank you.
Real quick, but I'm not holding you responsible.
Well, my hope is it could pick up in a couple of minutes here. Okay, is Dave Nelson or Carol Prokoff here? Okay, with that, I'd like to take C and D together. Their recognition of county employees who are retiring. Carol Prokoff has retired from the Douglas County Election Commissioners after 25 years of service. And we'd like to recognize Dave E. Nelson, who's retired from the Douglas County Department of Correction after 13 years. We want to thank them for their service and wish them well in their retirement. Is there a motion to approve C and D? Second, motion by Commissioner Boyle, second by Commissioner Borgeson. Please vote.
Motion passes, all voting yes.
Commissioner Boyle?
I'll make a comment about Carol Prokop. I've known her for many, many years, and a wonderful professional person. And in the election office, she always gave me a good count. Oh, I didn't mean that way.
Okay. If we can we move to recess the Board of Commissioners meeting?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Morgan, seconded by Commissioner Kraft. Please vote.
Chair Rogers.
Yeah.
Motion passes, all voting yes.
We'll now call to order the Douglas County Board of Equalization meeting. Roll call.
Commissioner Borgeson? Commissioner Boyle? Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Here.
Commissioner Duda?
Here.
Commissioner Kraft? Commissioner Morgan? Mr. Chair.
Here, item A, approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, May 8th, 2018. Item B, call for a meeting and set Tuesday, June 5th, 2018 as the date for the hearing on certified assessments and corrections. It's the will of the board. Motion by Commissioner Duda, second by Commissioner Boyle. Please vote.
Motion passes, all voting yes.
Item C, citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on a matter of the Board of Equalization that's not officially listed on today's agenda. Are there any citizens' comments? Seeing none, we have resolutions D, E, F, G, H, and I, and J. Is the will of the board to take those together? Motion by Commissioner Boyle, seconded by Commissioner Borgeson. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yeah, I just have kind of an informational question on E. I noticed there are representatives of the Assessor Register of Deeds Department here. Certified assessment correction reflecting a correction in the values and approval. And I know we go through a process whereby landowners have the ability to appeal assessed values. And these are kind of out of that cycle. So I'm wondering, how do we determine, properties like this? Are the property owners coming forward and saying, hey, take another look out of cycle? Or does the Assessor Register of Deeds itself, on its own initiative, review assessments? Just tell me how that works.
Mike Goodwillie, Douglas County Assessor Register of Deeds Office. The answer, Commissioner Kavanaugh, is yes. Is when we find this kind of a clerical mistake. I think apparently for some of these parcels, for example, when the subdivision was created and houses were getting built, a number of years ago, somehow some improvements got on the wrong parcel. Well, when you find that you've got one on the wrong parcel, that means there's a parcel that doesn't have it, so you got to fix two. And so, as a practical matter, we could have found that, or other times the taxpayer calls us and we take a look at it. There are some mechanisms that we can use, to fix things that are clearly clerical errors. There's a statute that lets us come to the board after the 25th of March, which is the last time we can unilaterally touch a value, that enables us to come to the board with corrections for things like omitted property or clerical errors. There's also a mechanism that we're going to bring to you in a couple of weeks for overvalued, undervalued properties. And so I guess the answer is it can come to you both ways. It can be something a taxpayer can bring to our attention, or it can be something that we find as we're doing our cycle of inspections for real properties in Douglas County.
I see. So we have, I don't know, 6 or 7 of these here today. Were they brought in different ways, or do you know? Can you tell?
I don't know if these all came one way or another way. Just glancing at them, I suspect there were a couple of them that were brought to us by the taxpayers, and then I suspect there were several others that we found on our own.
Okay. And these all reflect property assessment devaluations, right?
It doesn't necessarily have to be. I haven't looked at the numbers really. I mean, we're trying to make a correction, and they can be up or down. More often than not, they're down. But I hate to generalize.
Right.
Because if you find, just for example, if you can find omitted property, and without getting too deep in the weeds, actually there's 2 sorts of omitted property. One I like to call good omitted, which means it's just something that we missed. The other is something that we'll call bad omitted, which is something like an unpermitted bathroom or swimming pool or something like that. There are some obligations that the taxpayer has when they make an improvement of a certain sort to either get a permit or file an informational statement with the assessor's office, and occasionally we'll find stuff that, where that didn't happen. And that's omitted property that we can go back and get in this sort of fashion. So these come to us in a variety of ways.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you for that explanation.
Commissioner Morgan.
I can maybe help a little bit. I'm going to be abstaining from this. for example, on Spring Green, which we manage, my understanding is there was an increase in the value, and that was noticed by ourselves and the board. That's a property 3 blocks south of 90th and Dodge on the east side of the street. Well, it's kind of common area where you cannot build. So then when that was brought to the attention of the assessor's office, they recognized that, and there was the reversal back to the previous value because it's unbuildable.
And if I may add to that, you know, sometimes when these things are platted and set up originally, we don't necessarily know that's an unbuildable lot.
Right.
In fact, there's one other on this that was exactly like that, where we had to dig back through back deeds to find out, hey, there are restrictions that say you can't build on this thing. So when a taxpayer comes to us with that kind of an issue, and we go ahead and verify it, and it's clear it wasn't buildable, then yeah, we can go back and correct it.
So the assessor's office was very responsible on that particular property, and it was directed by the board to take care of that matter. They did, and we did.
I see. When that valuation, I presume it went up on you, the valuation on those properties?
Yeah, and I don't have any ownership or anything. We
No,
just manage it. It's a
the
homeowners
management.
HOA, homeowners association.
Right. But when you notice that the valuation went up, I guess my question is, we have this whole process of appealing valuations and resetting valuations and stuff. And I'm just curious, why was that not done in that course of events, ultimately resulting in, I guess, Board of Equalization? I don't know. I'm just asking because I don't know, and I'm sure you guys do. So was there some reason that it wasn't done then and we're doing it now? I appreciate that we want to correct mistakes, but we have a whole process and period for doing that, don't we?
Sure. I mean, they would have had the ability to protest that value the same as any other citizen. My suspicion is that because they were used to having it unbuildable, you know, valuation notices came and went. For whatever reason, it got shelved and it didn't happen. And probably the big tip-off was when the tax statement showed up. You know, I don't know for sure, but certainly, yes, in these scenarios, they could have come to the board through the normal taxpayer protest process. And for whatever reason, it slipped through the cracks. The statutes dealing with clerical error, most of which these are, says the county can go back any time.
Okay. And I think that's a good flexibility to have. So it's a narrow definition of when you can appeal these out of cycle, is that right? Just
There are some very specific reasons you can do it. It isn't, you know, so for example, clerical error, things like data entry error, improvements on the wrong parcel, interestingly enough, computer error, mathematical error, things of that nature. I think the statute is 77-128 that lays out what clerical errors are, give or take a couple of section numbers. And then for overvalued or omitted, there's a specific definition for that too.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
No further questions. There's a motion second. Please vote.
Motion passes. Commissioner Morgan abstained for the reasons he stated, and all other commissioners voting yes.
We have an appeal, item K, is a waiver of a 10% penalty for a late filing of the 2018 personal property returns for Rockbrook Camera Inc., 2909 South 169th Plaza, Suite 100, Omaha, Nebraska.
Well, let me sum up at least, all right? At least get something
That's
on
for
the
my
record.
second right now.
But
Come on.
before you guys break the law, let's at least get it on the record, okay? Rockbrook Camera is business here in Douglas County. It has 2 locations, one located in District 66, the other in Elkhorn, meaning they file 2 different personal property returns. For 2018, they've been online filers. So for 2018, we sent them sort of our customary reminder email that we send to online filers dated 3/13/2018. We did not see a return timely. The reminder email actually got opened on the 2nd of May. and the business filed the return that same day. The filing deadline is May 1st. Returns filed between May 2nd and June 30 by law, 77-1233-04, receive or are supposed to receive a mandatory 10% of the taxes due penalty. The reason I say mandatory is because the law says there shall be imposed a 10% penalty. It's a shall, it's not a may. And so in this scenario, 10% of the taxes due represents on one account about $230, on the other account about $120. It's interesting, there are other tax programs in Nebraska that actually provide for the potential abatement of tax penalties. So for example, under the Nebraska income tax statutes, 77-2790 provides that the Department of Revenue may impose a penalty, and they even have an abatement form. The abatement form says, I declare my failure to file was not due to negligence or intentional disregard of the laws, but from the following causes, which I submit were beyond my reasonable control. I would suggest to you that, at least based on the protest that we have, which simply says, I forgot, I'm not sure you get to anything that's beyond anybody's reasonable control. And I would leave this question with you. I get the sympathies for somebody who's one day late. Frankly, I have them too. But help me with when the magic deadline is. You know, is it one day it's not right to apply a penalty? How about 10 days late? How about 100 days late? How about a year late? I mean, at some point, do you get down to the track where personal responsibility takes over and you need to apply the penalty? So that said, that's the background story.
Commissioner Duda.
I would have a question for the county attorney, if I might, Teresa. Do you agree with Mr. Goodwilly's reading of the law, that we really have to impose this fine, that we don't have the discretion to waive it?
Teresa, your county attorney's office, I do. And in fact, there's another statute that's a little later in that section that more fully describes what Mr. Goodwilly has said. And it says that in fact, the board's only authority is to change a penalty that is wrongly imposed or improperly calculated, and this is neither of those. So it defines very narrowly when the board can act, and this does not fit into that narrow exception.
All right, here's my follow-up question then. If this board, because we know best, if we choose to waive the fee anyway, will you represent us if somebody takes us to Turk when we are going directly against the legal advice you give us? Will you still represent us if this goes to Turk, or do we have to then hire outside counsel to represent us?
If I may, I will answer that in executive session with you. We will discuss what would be appropriate for legal counsel to do on your behalf should this go any further than it is today.
Okay. Well, I worry that as we bend over backwards to accommodate Rockbrook for their negligence, that this could end up biting us, that we could potentially have to go hire outside counsel to represent us just so we can save Rockbrook $300 because they didn't file on time. Be aware.
Commissioner Morgan.
My thought is, listening to Teresa, knowing that we don't have that authority, and kind of ties into what you said, Mr. Duda, you know, we'd start to spend more money than if we paid the fine for Rockbrook camera ourselves. But the fact is, I think what we should do is at least, and I think Mr. Goodwilly kind of touched on it, we should have something that maybe there be a 10-day or 15-day grace period, and work to change that statute and talk to Marcos possibly about that when we meet with the state senators, because most billings that you have a little bit of a grace period. Your mortgage payments may be due on the 1st. There isn't a late penalty till the 15th or whatever. So let's work maybe toward that, would be my suggestion when we work on our legislation. And I'm sorry to put that on Marcos, but sometimes he enjoys it anyway. So I thank you, Mr. Goodwillie, for your comments.
I would add a postscript, and, I don't know that we would have any argument with a, 10 or 15 day grace period, but if you do that, you know the next case that walks in the door is gonna be the guy who files on the 16th day.
That'll be their problem.
Okay, I'm just saying, wherever you put that line, there's always gonna be somebody that's close to it, but just on the wrong side of it.
At least there'd be some grace period
Okay.
instead of that day or 3 day, like you said, late. But that's only my opinion. The board
Sure.
has a different
I
majority
would
than
also
me.
suspect that the reason that the personal property penalty statute is a mandatory shall as opposed to the income tax statute, which is a discretionary may, is, and I'll just share this, for a long time when I wore the state's uniform, we managed 9 assessment offices and dealt with 9 different county boards. And I was struck by the pressure that sometimes influential taxpayers would try and put on their county board or their assessor when they missed a deadline like this. And so my suspicion is what the legislature is trying to do was take that pressure off the local office holders and just simply make it mandatory. Whether that's a good idea or not, I don't know, but I suspect that was part of their thinking.
Commissioner Boyle.
Mr. Goodwillie, is this illegal?
Is what illegal?
If we vote yes, is it illegal?
I think in the sense that you are going beyond the powers granted to you as a county board, yes, I do.
Why do you bring it to us?
We don't. We can't force people to not, I mean, people do have the right to file a protest, even if the grounds on which they can get relief is limited. And so we didn't put a gun to Rockbrook Cameron's head and say, file a protest.
What this amounts to is some office, whether it's, with all due respect, whether it's yours, the assessor register of deeds, or whoever it is, doesn't have the guts to tell a taxpayer no. So you shove it to,
No,
wait a
wait a
minute,
minute.
hold it. So then you bring it down to us, so we can collect a levy, tell them to go to hell, and then you can say, well, I brought it down, but those commissioners voted no. I don't appreciate this, and I want this to stop. I've been after you and the law for so long. This is nuts. And if we don't have the authority, don't bring it down and take all this time jabbering about state laws when it's illegal. So that's the end of it. I don't want to hear from you about this because I've told you about this so many times. If you don't have the guts to tell them no,
We did tell them no, that's why
well
we're
then,
here.
then they shouldn't. They shouldn't be here. If we can't do anything, then don't bring it to us.
So when there's a due process right to file a protest, even on a narrow ground, you would suggest to us that we tell the taxpayer they can't exercise that right.
Tell them it's illegal. That we
We
don't
have,
the,
actually.
That we don't have the authority. I don't think you have, but anyway, you're passing the buck, and I don't appreciate it.
Seeing no further questions.
And Claire, I'll defend you if you vote yes. If it takes 20 years to get you out of jail,
What's the will of the board?
I'm making a motion to approve.
That motion dies for lack of second.
I'm sorry, was there a motion to
Approve it. That means to waive it.
waive? No, by,
Commissioner Boyle.
Me.
I'll second that.
Okay.
There is a second then. Please vote.
I vote yes.
Motion fails. Commissioners Boyle and Kavanaugh voting yes, all other commissioners voting no.
We go down in flames.
So with that,
Jim.
that failing, that basically means that it stands and the fee gets assessed. Okay.
Teresa York County Attorney's Office. The motion brought by the taxpayer was to waive the penalty, and that motion fails, so the penalty remains.
Okay. So with that, Commissioner Boyle.
I'd like to ask someone, whether it's Marcos or our legal counsel, bring this to an end. It has to stop somewhere, so it stops with us, and now the assessor registered deeds said, well, I brought it down and it failed, so, they're the ones who did this to me. So I want this to stop. I don't care. Obviously, I voted yes. I think it's a technicality. They're taxpayers. They pay a lot of taxes, and this is a minor thing. They should be, their effort should be respected as a really good company in this community. So that's why I said yes. But I think, we need to get this stopped. So I'm going to rely on, I don't want to ever have this happen again. So somebody better get a bill put together and get this stopped. That's all I'm telling you. It has to stop at the assessor registered deeds. I'm sorry, The law says we can't do anything, and there's no appeal. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
Not to belabor the conversation anymore, but just for clarification, the clerk's office is actually the one that puts these protests on the agenda. And I'm trying to find the statute, but Mr. Goodwillie nailed it. I mean, even though there's, most of the time when they do file the protest or appeal, there's one statute that says, well, it's not going to work. There's another statute that says, but you still have a right to file the appeal, so we don't, we put them on the agenda. So just wanted to make that
So you're to
clarification.
blame. No.
With that, is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Commissioner Boyle, seconded by Commissioner Kraft. Please vote.
1 second, please. Okay, thank you.
I'm pressing it. It's not.
There we go. Commissioners, Commissioner Rogers, you voting yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Motion passes, all voting yes.
Okay, is there a motion to reconvene the Board of Commissioners?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Boyle, seconded by Commissioner Morgan. Please vote.
1 moment, please. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Commissioners Morgan and Commissioner Kavanaugh. Motion passes, all voting yes.
We'll go to item 2, the consent agenda. We have 20 items. There is a request to pull items I-4 and item L. Are there any other items that the board wish to pull? With that, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with the removal of I-4 and item L?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Boyle, seconded by Commissioner Duda. Please vote.
Motion passes, all voting yes.
Item I-4 is amendment of the, Amendment 1 to the agreement with Charles Drew Health Center regarding women, infants, and children. I need to abstain on that by being a board member. Is there a motion to approve by the board?
Second.
There's a motion, a second, to approve item I-4. Please vote. Okay.
Motion passes. Commissioner Rogers abstaining, other commissioners voting yes. And Mr. Chair, I apologize. We didn't catch the motion in the second. Who made the motion in the second on that one?
Commissioner Boyle and I think Morgan.
Okay, thank you.
We'll go to item L, resolution directing the chair to authorize and sign a sales agreement to purchase property from OHA in the amount of $2,750,000 plus cost. Motion by Commissioner Boyle, second by Commissioner Borgeson. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. This is only the second time that we've had an opportunity as a county board to discuss this important issue. The last time, I think we spent about 45 minutes on it. So I intend to make sure that the public's aware that what we're talking about here involves significant funds, and that it is the first step towards the expenditure of what is estimated in excess of $100 million worth of resources, which will inevitably involve a property tax increase. We've had extensive discussions, very few of them in public, and so I think it's important that we start having this discussion in public as we go forward on what would arguably be the largest single capital construction expenditure in the history of Douglas County. The resolution attached to this does spell out some of the desires that I share with Douglas County. I am in wholehearted support of juvenile justice. I don't know anyone who isn't. And I recognize that we can make things better in the juvenile justice system. But having, as a practicing attorney, actually worked there, and having, as a county commissioner, actually talked to most of the major players in the juvenile justice system about needs, and looking at the needs of Douglas County overall, I have to say, first of all, this project does not address our most pressing needs. Our most pressing needs are with the overcrowding and understaffing of the Department of Corrections, which is at a crisis point, and with our lack of available mental health facilities, which is related in part to the overcrowding of corrections, but is also at a crisis point, both of which would, if you were strategically planning the needs of a public entity like Douglas County, require immediate actions before what we have proposed before us, which is essentially the purchase of real estate. This real estate purchase, as I indicated, had about a 45-minute discussion on, I believe, April 24th. That's it in terms of the Douglas County Board's public discussion of this project. By contrast, when we did our $35 million public safety bond, we had hours and hours and hours and hours of public discussion, both in committee and before the board, relative to proceeding with that. So I think it's appropriate that when we're talking about embarking on a $100 million expenditure, that we talk about what we're actually trying to do. As I understand it, the plan is to acquire this property and property on the same street, formerly occupied by the Corps of Engineers. And we already own a property in between that's the headquarters of our .com facility, and basically tear them all down and build a new, what has variously been called a Douglas County Justice Center or Douglas County Criminal Justice Center that would include the Douglas County Separate Juvenile Court and its related offices, the Douglas County Attorney, Douglas County Public Defender, and the Douglas County Youth Center. And these are different offices, in large part doing different things, that all currently occupy facilities that, although not perfect, are currently adequate to their needs. Unlike the Douglas County Correction Center, which is overcrowded and understaffed, these facilities, and particularly the Douglas County Juvenile Court, which is under construction for a new courtroom right now, are not overcrowded and understaffed. They are not in perfect locations, but they are in locations that have been adequate for a long time, and from personal talks with the heads of those offices will be adequate for the foreseeable future, unlike the overcrowded and understaffed Douglas County Correction Center. As a matter of fact, our youth center is perfectly adequate and more than adequate in that in the last 10 years, due to the good efforts of people on this board and others to divert youth from incarceration, has seen a population reduction, an actual reduction in population from 2007, when the average population was 167, to 2017, when the average population was 79. And that's a huge step in the right direction. If we could do the same with Douglas County Corrections, we would not be facing the imminent crisis that we are in the overcrowded and understaffed Douglas County Corrections facility. We've had testimony in public, on the record, before this board, from the director of the Douglas County Youth Center, that there is no need to move that center. As a matter of fact, That center is currently in a better location than what is being proposed here, which, if I understand it correctly, would be in sight of the Douglas County Correctional Center. Douglas County Youth Center is not designed to prepare young people to become career criminals. It's prepared to take young people who have problems and try to get them back into the mainstream of society. Where it's at now in a medical residential setting is much preferable to put it in the middle of downtown Omaha in sight of the correction center, piled onto a building and with no room to expand into outside spaces. As a matter of fact, the study that was commissioned by the Building Commission, one of their findings was it would be a good idea to look at a more campus-like setting for the corrections, for the Douglas County Youth Center. One similar to the one that it's in, where it does have room for expansion. But there's no need. It's not overcrowded. It's not understaffed. There's no burning need to move it. Programs like the Youth Detention Alternative Initiative, the Juvenile Assessment Center, and Operation Youth Success have had a positive impact, and those who have been involved in that should be congratulated on that. That reduction from 167 to 79, I think, in large part can be directly related to the impact of programs like that. But when Superintendent Brad Alexander spoke before this board earlier this year and said there was no need for a new juvenile detention center, I think that that should be taken into account when we're proposing a new juvenile detention center. It's not necessary right now. So where is the evidence to suggest that building a new courtrooms and office space is going to benefit the youth? What mental health interventions and counseling could $2.75 million, which is being proposed today, or $100 million, which will be proposed before this is over, do for that issue and others, like the overcrowding and understaffing of our Douglas County Correction Center, and our total need for more mental health facilities countywide. If we were looking at two big crises that we wanted to throw $100 million at, we might look at those two, corrections and mental health, before we get to what is adequate but not perfect in terms of juvenile justice right now. Adding one new juvenile judge has precipitated this stampede to tear down buildings and build new ones. Incidentally, several hundred thousands has been spent to renovate the courtroom for this judge in the courthouse right now. Several hundred thousand. There does not appear to be a clear plan that the public has had input into. Again, this is the second time you've heard about this at a Douglas County board meeting. The last time it had a 45-minute discussion, of which 10 minutes was a PowerPoint presented by the administration of Douglas County about what this $100 million project could potentially do. So you've essentially had a 10-minute briefing on this. The rest of it was commissioners asking questions. But 45 minutes on $100 million, I think, is hardly adequate. The strategic plan that I would envision would, first of all, point out that we have other more pressing needs in Douglas County than the building of a $100 million new construction for a juvenile justice center, or a justice center, depending on which document you read. But a strategic plan would also take into account the situation of DouglasCounty.com, which is situated in one of the buildings scheduled for demolition, and which apparently does not have a new home. At least it hasn't been discussed in public where .com would go when that facility was demolished to build this new facility. This project is not well conceived and is a bit out of control. When the owner of one of the properties that we're trying to acquire at 4020 South 18th Street says publicly that he is not interested in selling. It continues to grow, though. In the last discussion that we had, the 45-minute discussion, the only public discussion that this project has had, We had a brief talk about the financing involved in this, and I think that that's a very interesting question that should be outlined in detail so that the public knows what they're getting into. The addition to this program that's happened since then is a matter that came up at the May 10th meeting of the Building Commission, where they expressed an intent to build a parking facility for an additional $20 million. How could the county fill another parking facility? We have empty spaces in the facility just west of the Civic Center right now. And we recently received a briefing relative to streetcars in Omaha that indicated that since 1963, parking facilities have grown 40% in downtown Omaha, and jobs, the number of people coming to work in downtown Omaha, has decreased by 44%. There's actually less need for parking facilities than there ever was. The real difficulty, I think, in this particular step, which is to spend $2.75 million on a building that is across the street from where we sit, is unlike almost any other commercial real estate deal that I'm familiar with, and I've talked to people in the business that they're familiar with, there's been no appraisal relative to the purchase price of this building. The OHA building has not been assessed because it's a public entity and its predecessor was a not-for-profit. So why didn't we get an appraisal of the property before we decided to purchase it? We're paying essentially $101 per square foot for a building that is registered as average, when the going price for good commercial real estate in downtown Omaha, good commercial real estate, better commercial real estate than this, is $85 to $95. Why are we paying this kind of a premium without an appraisal for this facility that we probably don't need right now? There's also in this resolution, in addition to the $2.75 million cost, an add-on of plus closing costs and fees related to the sale of this parcel. What are those closing costs and fees? What are we approving here? Because obviously it's $2.75 million plus. And where does it come from? None of those questions have been discussed in detail before the board. This is on the agenda for approval right now. I think that what we need to look at is, how about a public discussion of this? I've discussed this before, and the only other public discussion that we've had on this, the 45 minutes that we had on April 24th. And I'm going to propose it again, that make a motion that we lay this over. There's no burning need for us to make this offer, this very, very generous offer to OHA now. There's no burning need for OHA to move now, although I understand that there is a contingent to this of OHA moving perhaps to an adjacent property, and I'd like that to be discussed as well. It appears to me that what we're involved in here is more of a real estate transaction kind of posing as a juvenile justice center or a justice center. The name keeps changing. And if that's the case, then we should have a full-blown discussion about that. Commissioner Boyle and I have talked over the years about Douglas County acquiring adjacent properties to the footprint that we have, both for the courthouse and for the the Douglas County Omaha Civic Center, as a good idea, because frankly, the courthouse was built 100 and some years ago, and this place was built in the 70s, and we've grown, and the population has grown, the needs have grown, and they will continue, hopefully, to grow in a vibrant community. So looking at adjacent properties for acquisition probably makes some sense. But as everyone should know, you can acquire a property, an existing property that has good structural value, and repurpose it for a fraction of the cost that you could acquire, demolish, and rebuild, and that's what's being proposed here. We're taking properties that could be used, are being used adequately for their current purposes, and demolishing them so that we can build a larger project that is really not one of our primary needs, like Douglas County Corrections or mental health capacity, at premium prices. This is just the beginning. Why do we have a situation here before us of a property that has had no appraisal, and we're offering them in excess of the going value, market value for similar properties? We're offering $2.7 million, which is $101 plus per square foot for a property that has average condition, when the premium offered for very good properties in downtown Omaha, which this is not, is $85, $90 a square foot. So what exactly are we doing here? What we're doing is classic no plan, seat of the pants progression. And this is something that I've talked about since I've been on the board. I'm going to continue to talk about. Not smart government, and costly as well. We can do some of the things anticipated by this plan. We can give the juvenile justice courts and their related offices a new home near the courthouse in existing facilities that can be refurbished for a fraction of the cost and at no tax increase. We can find facilities to combine the offices of the public defender and the county attorney near the courthouse, adjacent with good access, and refurbish those existing facilities at a fraction of the cost that we're talking about here. And we could take the savings and refurbish the juvenile detention campus at 42nd and Woolworth, and address the overcrowding and understaffing problems at Douglas County Corrections, and address the critical mental health deficiencies in our community, and still have money left over with no tax increase. Why don't we consider that? Before we go forward with another seat of the pants, no strategic plan, really big expenditure, why don't we consider some alternatives that are less costly, serve the purpose as well or better, and don't involve a tax increase? So I have a couple of direct questions, I guess, for our finance person, Mr. Lorenz, and those relate to the cost here. Mr. Lorenz, I see that we have a $2.75 million cost plus closing costs and fees related to the sale. So what exactly are the closing costs and fees?
They are capped at $100,000.
Okay. And we are dealing with a real estate agent on this, or who are we actually dealing with?
We're dealing primarily with the owners of the property.
And when you say primarily, is that exactly who we're dealing with, or is there?
Well, we're dealing directly with them, but it also involves their attorney, their counsel, their board of directors, but it's a direct one-on-one relationship.
Okay, so there's no real estate agent like you would have in a standard real estate transaction. Is that correct?
Not on this property.
Okay. On the other property that we've made an offer on, is there one on that?
To my knowledge, that's still at an early stage, but I'm not aware of,
Okay.
the details of that at this time.
Right. Now, you're the head of finance here, and did we have an appraisal of this property, the OHA property?
I don't think we had an exact appraisal on this property, although this property did change hands within the past few years, so we had a pretty good estimate of market price based on that exchange.
Okay. I think you're right there. We did not have an appraisal. Is that what I'm hearing you saying? There was no appraisal of this property to come to this number for an offer. Is that right?
To the best of my knowledge.
Right. So we're offering $2.75 million, and you say in recent years there has been a transaction. This was sold from, I think, United Way to OHA in 2015, and the registered price for that was $2.1 million. So this is, $700,000 more than that purchase 3 years ago. And that's what you're saying that the $2.75 million was based on, was the 2.1 of...
That was a factor that was considered in the market assessment of the property, but the market assessment took into account all the current conditions and what we're trying to accomplish across the street.
Right. And the current conditions are rated, the quality of the building is rated as average. If appraisals were made and the quality of the building was rated as average, and these have been made on other properties in the immediate neighborhood of the building that we're talking about, this property would not have come out at $101+ per square foot, which is more than any of these adjacent properties have sold for in recent times. So tell me, how do we justify paying $101 a square foot for an average property when quality properties, good properties, are going for $85 a square foot? How do we come to that number? How did you come to that number?
I think it's part of the master plan, what we have for the development across the street, and what it's going to take to secure the properties and give us the footprint that we need to go ahead with this significant project.
Okay, and this master plan that you referred to, is that a document? Is that a public document?
It's what we've been discussing in executive session.
Okay.
There's a part of me that thinks some of this questioning of Joe is unfair to Joe Lorenz because he has not been the one. There's been a lot of other people involved. Jerry Leahy, who is our property person, and I don't feel, and I'm making my personal opinion, the cross-examination that we do here with people that come before this board seems to be somewhat unfair, but that's only my opinion. And if you have some questions you want to direct toward me concerning real estate, I'll be glad to hear them, because when you tell me other buildings are selling for $85 a square foot that are much better quality properties, I'd like to hear some addresses in the downtown Omaha area along Harney Street, because I know an appraisal was done on the MUD property without buildings, and I know it came back at $3 million on that vacant property to the east side of MUD.
Okay, can I continue? Please. Okay. I appreciate basically, we don't have a public rationale for offering $100 plus per square foot for a property that is listed as average, and that we don't have a public reason that we can give today for offering $2.75 million on a property that sold for a little over $2 million in 2015. I appreciate that. I also appreciate that we don't have a rationale for offering $900,000 for the 420 South 18th Street for a property that was valued in 2018 at $457, twice what it's valued for tax purposes. That's not really the point. The point is, this is only the second time the public's had an opportunity to even hear about this. The last time was April 24th, and that discussion lasted about 45 minutes. So what I'm saying is, why don't we take a deep breath before we jump into a $100 million construction project and lay this over, if for nothing else, to do what best practices in the real estate industry would do, which would be to get a professional appraisal on the OHA building. There's no rush for us to purchase the OHA building. OHA is adequate where it's at, and if they've got some other plans, well, maybe those should be discussed as well. But right now, we don't have to do this without these questions being answered. And so I'm going to make a motion that we lay this over for 2 weeks and that we allow in that intervening time to have some public committee hearings of the county board on this matter, and that we return to the board with recommendations relative to how to proceed. I also think that we should, in that intervening time, commission an appraisal to give us a real price for this rather than the exorbitant price that's being proposed here today. There's no reason to go forward in this fashion, and if we do, we're going to pay more than we necessarily have to pay for a property that is going to be there in 2 weeks' time. So that's my motion to lay this over for 2 weeks, to have those discussions and those actions.
That motion dies for lack of second. Commissioner Kraft.
Yes. Commissioner Kavanaugh, this has been discussed for hours in many different executive sessions. It has been debated, it has been mulled, it has been parsed, it has been divided. There have been objections, there have been items. Unfortunately, there are many executive sessions that you have either walked out of or missed for whatever reasons over the past 2 years. And this has been discussed for more than a year. Now, I realize executive session is not a public discussion, but the World Herald ran an article on this, and the news media has run articles on this when we were talking about MUD. So it's been in public discussion for quite a while as the necessity. Now, we are not talking about the second phase of this, should we go through with the second phase. Right now, we're just talking about OHA. I'm sorry, I told you it'd be just a second.
That's right, I knew it'd be longer.
Sometimes you have to buy what is available when it's available. If we were to delay, we could end up paying literally 10 times as much. If you buy an occupied building, many times you cannot take immediate possession because of leases. So if we want to, in the foreseeable future, take care of the needs of the county, and the county comes first, now is the time to proceed.
Commissioner Boyle.
Yes, and I can understand your questions, Commissioner Kavanaugh, and I even offered to trade places with you so you could get on the committee to hear this firsthand. But it comes down to some basic things. First of all, as you know, discussion of real estate, personnel, and litigation must occur in executive session because all of those subjects are very personal, and they should not be discussed in public. There's a time for, just as we did with the union contract, we presented a proposal back to the union, and they're going to be voting soon, but that's not supposed to be discussed in public until they come back and with a vote. And so there's a time for all of these things to occur. And Unfortunately, with the real estate purchase, it's still developing. You know, the reason that real estate is discussed in private behind closed doors is that we could have a hostile seller. We could have other things that happen that I'm not going to bring up because they shouldn't be discussed in public, but other things that would prevent us from assembling this property that we need so much. And it's the open meetings law that requires it, oddly enough, and so there's only 3 of us who can participate because otherwise there's a majority and we have to publish it. And you can't discuss those things in private. As for the appraisal of that building, you described it as average, and yet you said that you suggested, I believe, that we should remodel it. So, but that doesn't work real well. It's not Class A property, and I think, you know, the sale from United Way to the Housing Authority is probably the best proof of what the value is, and the additional money goes for the improvements that the Housing Authority has made. So that the point of all this, and I've heard the phrase over and over in these discussions, is to make them whole, so that we don't force the Housing Authority to leave a place and with their investment in it for less than they have in it. And so that's why it is the amount that it is. We also have some offices as the county attorney where we are renting space, that those leases will be gone once this new building is built. All of these other issues that you talked about are certainly very important. The one that you mentioned about corrections is if we should build an jail. We're not going to build any more jails. There's a real effort to try to clear it out with really innovative approaches to, and there was an article in the paper very well written that talked about the innovations that our director is trying to further push, and he has a very excellent staff that's doing a terrific job already. And he has a probation officer inside the jail. We've got people that work with veterans. We've got people that work with the homeless inside the jail, and so that we don't just put them out on the street. So we've done a lot of progressive things to try to drive that down. And right now, the Region 6 is considering a bid brought to us by Commissioner Borgeson, an idea of an emergency psychiatric care facility, which is really important. And so it's heading that way. It takes time. Unfortunately, government, with all of us with different views, it takes a while to get things moving sometimes. Best practices is really the reason why this is all being brought together. As you know, the judges for years, I hope I don't offend them, but you know, they won't go out to 42nd Street. They're not going to go out there. We've talked about trying to build a courtroom there and all that sort of thing, a number of courtrooms. It's not going to happen. So the only thing we can do is just like workers' comp. They won't do those things either. So there's no doubt in my mind we'd be sued if we tried to get them to move, you know, our friendly, and wouldn't blame them, I guess. But in any event, what we're trying to do is bring these offices together to serve the children even better, right inside the same building, and that is best practices. And you know, we have seven judges involved in one of these days. In the juvenile court, we have 7 courtrooms. We had to turn the conference room into a courtroom. This is not the first time we've done that. You know, this will eventually, I think, going to be a really big improvement. And I think you'll remember that the county attorney's space in the Hall of Justice floods. It may have flooded with all this rain we just had, but it did flood over the basement of what used to be the election commissioner's office. So that these facilities are not good, and plus they're spread out. The county attorney has 4 offices, and that's not a good thing. So it really would be better if we were, you know, we may keep the civil division here in this building, but generally I think it's going to all be together, which is a good thing. So I guess what it comes down to is that I understand your questioning. I've been concerned about it. Mark Kraft and I have talked about, as well as others have talked about, trying to get to a point where we can inform everybody, but it's so delicate that if we mess this up, we're really going to be in trouble. By mess it up, I mean by getting the word on the street about the problems we're having assembling this site. So I appreciate you raising these things. They're legitimate, and at some point yesterday we talked about having public meetings. And ironically, it's your committee that is in charge of these things, and you probably should be the person running the meetings. But we need to have meetings in public and inform, obviously, this kind of an expenditure, but we just can't do it with with the real estate that we're trying to assemble. And in executive session, you'll be informed about that, about today, I believe, about what the difficulties are. But it's not something you can talk about in public because it just can't be done. So I understand what you're saying, and I don't have any problem with you raising those issues, but they're just not, some of the points are just not quite on point yet, largely because you don't have that information, and with the open meetings law, we're not allowed to have more than 3 commissioners involved at any one time. So I guess I'd ask you to remain, please be patient, and participate in the executive sessions as you have in the past, and you'll get the information that you need, but you can't talk about it publicly. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Duda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the points you made, Mr. Commissioner Kavanaugh, is that it's probably not a bad idea to be assembling some property within the vicinity of our courthouse civic center, because we know we have to do something at some point. I'm not committed to any new building yet. I want to wait and see what it's going to look like, what it's going to cost, public input. I'm at the stage of, trying to assemble some property nearby. We've got to be doing something. And I don't know what that something is, but we have to be doing something. I gave my word to some state senators this year when they were talking about giving us a 7th juvenile judge, and they're talking about an 8th juvenile judge. You know, I gave them my word that I said, hold off on it, and we will try to get the wheels turning so that we've got someplace to put them. Yeah, we can cram a 6th judge into a closet up there, a little old conference room. They don't need any more conference rooms. But where are we going to cram the 7th judge and the 8th judge? To pretend they're not coming is naive. We have to be prepared. When I came into office, I've been blessed with a long tenure. We had 1 juvenile judge full-time and 1 part-time. Now we're building for our 6th. We had 12 district courtrooms. Now we're at 16, and they're talking about a 17th. Tell me where we're going to put these courtrooms if we aren't supposed to be acquiring more property, trying to plan for the future. I am not committed to a new youth center. I don't particularly think we need a new juvenile detention center. It ain't broke. I'll listen to the arguments. I'll listen to what kind of support we would get from the community if we were to look at a new juvenile detention center. It's not going to be in the same building as all the attorneys and everybody else, and it's going to be a couple of blocks away from the jail. I don't quite get why we're confusing those 2 issues. It is the responsible thing for us to be putting property together, just to plan for the future. It seems like we had a confidential leak out of one of our exec sessions where the addresses of the properties we were interested in suddenly go out in a letter to the property owners and to a bunch of other people saying the county's trying to get these. And the only thing that I can guess is somebody from that executive session shared confidential information with somebody else in an effort to undermine what this board is trying to do. It is a challenge to move forward and make things happen. This is going to be the biggest single thing that happens. I've been here 25 years. We've never seen anything like this. Never will. This is the biggest thing that will happen in my career. It is important. We have to do it. Our 106-year-old courthouse is just no longer adequate. It is a beautiful building. I hope that we can keep it functioning forever. We will never be able to replicate the grandeur of that building, but not everybody can fit in it. It has finite size, and as we continue to grow and criminal justice continues to grow, we listen to the public defender and county attorney show a statistic of 10% growth in their caseload every year going on right now. It's a growth industry, and this is a real basic responsibility of county government, is to provide an adequate courthouse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to try to put a little bit more of a positive spin on this. And historically, when I came on this board, and Commissioner Duda will remember, we talked about this, and Commissioner Duda and I actually tried to get the votes and plan put in to go on to the 42nd Street. It didn't happen. The will of the board was not there to do it. So we just kind of dropped it. When Commissioner Rogers came on, that conversation was had again. And in our strategic plan, there is conversation in that plan and bullet points about a juvenile justice center. We looked at the 42nd Street and didn't feel that that was feasible for a number of reasons. We started again to have those discussions as a board and said, you know what, let's see what else we can produce. We're trying to get there so that the plan will be able to be discussed openly and at public meetings. But the first phase of this is to acquire property, which has been explained we can't necessarily negotiate and shouldn't negotiate in public in order for us to get the best deal that we can for the taxpayers. And so, you know, I look at this and I ask myself this question when we go to embark on any venture that has to do with human capital, and that is the system that we have good enough for my family if they were to be thrust into the system? And the answer is no, because we can do better. And by doing better, we can serve not only in, thank God it never happened, but my family members or your family members, but the families in our communities are just as important and deserve better than what we are providing for them right now. I am supportive of looking at a new detention center because the holistic part of this is to do everything on one campus. There's efficiencies that are gained, and there's better service delivery for the families if we're able to do that. All of that stuff has to come yet. Those programming issues, those design issues, those there's lots of talk and discussion to be had yet. So this is the first part of it, and I'm excited as a board member. As Commissioner Duda said, we're the ones who have been here the longest, and this is big. It's very big, but it is long awaited and long needed, and I'm excited to see where and how we can continue on this venture. Thank you.
With that, there's a motion and a second. Please vote.
The motion right now.
Just
There
for
was a
the
motion
Commissioner Boyle made a motion. It was seconded by Commissioner Borgeson to approve item L.
And I'm going to be abstaining from this. I received word from the Accountability and Disclosure, and even at a meeting with them, that I don't have a conflict and could vote, but I feel that it's in my best interest not to vote on this matter, even though I have that letter. And I'm not sharing in any money or financial gain because of this, but I feel it's better that I abstain. So I want to state that, and if there's any question from any commissioner, I'll gladly answer.
Well, before we vote, I want to comment on Commissioner Morgan's contributions to this whole event. He is absolutely correct. He's been very cautious. I've observed him, and he has acted ethically and within his authority as a commissioner. He's been very, very careful, and I appreciate that, and I want it to be a part of the public record that he has carefully avoided any conflict of interest, and I appreciate his contributions tremendously.
I want to thank Commissioner Boyle.
Please vote.
I vote yes.
Just Commissioner Kavanaugh. Motion passes. Commissioner Kavanaugh voting no, Commissioner Morgan abstaining, all other commissioners voting yes.
Thank you. Item 4 is citizens' comments. Are there any citizens that would like to comment on Board of Commissioners related items that are not officially listed on this week's agenda? Seeing none. We'll go to item 5 in presentations. Letter A is a voluntary benefits update by Beck Insurance Solutions. Commissioner Borgeson.
Yes, this presentation was actually scheduled to be on a HR committee meeting that was had to be canceled because of our schedules. And so I've asked them to come here and do and I hope they're listening, an abbreviated presentation today for us. Again, this is one that comes every year for us as to what they're providing our employees.
Great, and thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to present. My name is Dave Beck, President of Beck Insurance Solutions. We partner with Douglas County to provide voluntary benefits, communications, and enrollment resources. Our office here in Omaha, 10250 Regency Circle. And with that, I'd like to start by thanking you again for the ability to be here and to give you an abbreviated version of what's going on with Beck Insurance and the voluntary benefits that we handle for county. Mission statement: creating lasting and trusting relationships to each of our clients while providing seamless service. I've been trained by a great mentor. You might call it groomed. All right, early voluntary benefits pioneer of Omaha, Mary America, aka Mom. All right. For those of you that don't know Mary, she introduced Aflac to Douglas County in the 80s. Through the credit union, participation grew steadily with grassroots efforts and hitting the pavement. Word of mouth, so much so that in 2000 it was decided that this popular benefit was worthy of getting onto payroll deduction as well as pre-tax. Having grown up around the business, I've been in voluntary benefits myself for over 25 years, from negotiating contracts on behalf of my clients, providing benefits communications, managing enrollments. As an independent broker, I serve as a client liaison, experienced with negotiating, again, on behalf of my clients, and this is important, especially to employees, and that's a time of claim, certainly. I'd like to introduce our office manager and client advocate, and 27 years, my spouse, Annie Beck, is with me, and I appreciate Annie being here to support our business, and she supports hundreds of county employees that we hear from weekly. Maybe not 100 a week, but quite a few. So keeping a close pulse on the claims processing to ensure accurate and prompt payment of claimants to claimants, as well as serving as an advocate for our VAPs. That'd be like someone that just retired, Jane Faust, now Roseo. They do a wonderful job. So we want to make sure that we're not adding extra burden on their busy plates already. So with that said, we handle three pieces of benefits for the county. So you'll see them represented here. We'll start with the Aflac portion. Let's talk about Aflac. They actually been around for a long time. Actually, 1950s is when they got their start. They're a great partner, industry leader who demonstrates a strong commitment to staying ahead of the curve. A great partner for the county. They offer a robust benefit layout, very competitive pricing. They offer one-day pay that I've not found anywhere else with any other carrier that we might bring to the table. And they continue to bring more and more value to the table. So you'll hear about that with a few other comments I'll make, reaffirming themselves as a viable partner for Douglas County. As you see here, a lot of your employees are utilizing Aflac. We have a great showing and really have created a lot of friends over the years. Participation by department, you all have the slides, so you'll have that to refer to, and possibly even notice a little bit of a correlation between risk of various jobs with how well it's received in particular departments. Breaking it down by policy, employees are concerned for financial security, and you'll see that represented with kind of how this stacks and what's most important, from the accident, the cancer, the short-term disability, all the way down the line. These popular offerings create a substantial savings for Douglas County as well as Douglas County employees. Other than short-term disability, an individual life policy, all of these deductions are eligible for pre-tax. By the time the premiums go before state, federal, and FICA taxes, the employees are able to see roughly 25% reduction in the net cost when you factor in that tax savings. Since county does match on that FICA tax, that represents nearly, well, actually a little over $49,000 in savings just this year. And considering all the years that this has been in place with a very strong showing going way back, that amounts to a very nice savings all added up. Next, we'll take a look at the group whole life offering with Mass Mutual. So, provides competitive pricing. That price never does go up. The guarantee issue was part of the negotiation, a very important piece of that, in that there are a lot of people we work with that are not insurable. And so this is kind of unique in that this is truly a group plan. We rolled it out last summer. The $50,000 was what was given to us with some generic census data, and we were very pleased with that. So as long as an employee is actively at work, they're able to buy the coverage. The GI offer was also providing that someone could start with a very small policy and afforded and given the ability to increase it in subsequent years, again with no questions asked. By the way, the GI offer is also on the table for newly hired. We'll talk more about that here in a few slides, because that's important to understand, especially since that GI offer is only available during their newly eligible period, which is first of the month following 30 days. So we literally have less than a 60-day window to get a very important message across. The plan is available for dividends, which simply means profits go back to policyholders rather than going back distributed through Wall Street. By the way, they have not missed a dividend since 1850s. Very, very solid company that we're doing business with. So how was it received? Again, you'll see the stats. It went over very well. Great reception, great product, and it also blended in real well with the distribution, the communication that we've kind of worked out for many, many years. Thank you, Mary America. So the ability to purchase a policy on a spouse, a child, and a grandchild, you'll see that many did just that. Let's take a look at Legal Shield. That's also an offering through county. It has been for many years. It simply wasn't communicated. There was no servicing reps that picked that up. Not sure of where that broke. The connection was broke, but not a problem for us. I've personally owned Legal Shield for many years, and it's a great product. So it's not uncommon, though, for an employee to have reservations about possibly being fearful of using an attorney. Now, in all due respect for many attorneys, I think in the room, I don't know where that concept comes from, because there's really many reasons why people should lean on the services of the attorney. And so this plan really easily allows for an employee to seek an opinion of a lawyer for any personal legal matters without worrying about the hourly rate, which can often be in excess of $200 per hour. So this literally is available for pennies on the dollar. The program does provide peace of mind for any legal matters that are being addressed, allowing your employee to show up to work without distraction. So again, very important. One of the most popular uses of Legal Shield is actually prep for wills and trusts and general estate planning. So provides protection for one's personal identity. As the next slide is, what you'll see is the identity theft, which is a sister product offered also through the same vendor. Identities are compromised every day. This is a major, major problem. It's a major problem that, in fact, your HR staff wanted to make sure the communication was very strong and clear on this year. So this product actually has your normal perks that you'd expect. You can check your credit report, your scores, monitor with alerts for anything that's going on. But they take it to the next level with consultation. They teamed up with a company called Kroll. Kroll Advisory Solutions out of Georgia has licensed investigators that will be dispatched very quickly should one of your employees' identities be compromised. Partnerships moving forward. Initiatives we've been working on. We actually did some planning strategy sessions early this year. Met with Karen Butch and HR Director Matt Oberly. That provided us real valuable inside feedback as to how we can bring more value to the table. From a technology standpoint, Matt expressed his desire to improve efficiencies where possible as far as utilizing online resources, web-based resources. Makes sense. In addition, heard loud and clear, echoing what I just said per Karen, is we want to heighten the awareness of why Legal Shield, why identity theft in general. And so she felt that was important, get the word out. And so that feedback we took to our vendor partners, and they responded. Employees now have the ability to go directly onto the Douglas County website, the HR link, and they can learn about the Legal Shield. They can learn about the ID Shield protection. They can actually enroll as of today. Also had related discussions with AFLAC, and just in this last week, I forwarded the AFLAC microsite proof that was completed, just needing final approval as of yesterday. Was given an email, a thumbs up for Karen Butch, who said, and I quote, "This looks great to me. It's very easy to navigate, provides all the necessary information. I think this is a wonderful tool for our employees." So we're able to deliver utilizing technology, Legal Shield, ID Shield, and AFLAC. The Group Whole Life, a little bit more challenging. The technology is actually there. It's actually a very robust website that allows the employee to price plans and to enroll, but the setup requires the employee census information to be preloaded. So the information necessary from county to populate the site is not information provided to voluntary benefit vendors. So as this is a group plan, yet available on a voluntary basis, I am hopeful that this can be reconsidered, as the accessibility will help put the communication piece and enrollment experience in sync with departmental objectives. So allowing an exception to the voluntary benefits precedent might be worthy of consideration, and something that I'd be glad to have further conversations about with any concerns and questions. Otherwise, we currently do communicate the benefits of the fall open enrollment, and as well as new hire orientations when possible. So we are getting more and more involved with new hire orientations. It really depends on the department, the elected official, as to their ability to try to be as accommodating to this as possible. With so much information to be passed along through the normal orientation process, we see that employees are more likely to take advantage of voluntary benefits with better exposure at their orientation. Other than your typical time constraints, the benefits appear to be worthwhile, and a correlation that links better understanding of one's benefits package to increased participation. So I'll be making new hire orientations to the different departments. We've got quite a few set up at this time. Again, keep in mind of that short window for that Group Whole Life product, as that's a critical piece of the equation to make sure is clearly communicated. So ultimately, whether it's a fall open enrollment or it's a new hire orientation, health fairs, lunch and learns, our presence leads to more access, accountability, and ultimately security for employees, their families. This exposure does lead to confidence in personally knowing who to call, and that their needs will be attended to, and further strengthening our relationship and our accountability with the employees and to you in Douglas County. Recent health fair, we attended both. Nice picture of Annie and Sarah, and we really enjoy those. We can connect with a lot of friends, policyholders, and a lot of good information out to everyone. So those are very nicely received. With that, we know how this added protection, along with good customer service, really does matter on a personal level. We were tickled, honored, really, to receive this note from one of your longstanding employees who works in the treasurer's office. So, Super Scheid, she's been there for over 25 years. She actually got enrolled in AFLAC early on. She says that the AFLAC has exceeded her expectations over the years. I'm quoting Sue by saying, working with Mary America from the beginning to now having the pleasure of working with Annie Beck, I feel it is more than just an ordinary insurance company. One-on-one personal experience I have been given gives me security of knowing that they really care. Over the years, I've added more policies. I'm grateful that I did. I have to contact them many, many times for questions, guidance, never once feel that my concerns are discounted. I guess paraphrase. Just knowing I can always speak to a person, not a computer, refreshing. I truly feel Aflac is a fantastic company. Our representatives make them great. I'll always be grateful to Mary, Annie, Dave. So this kind of validation, it really keeps us fired up, keeps us focused on our mission of lasting, trusting relationships with our clients and the seamless service, which is very important to us. So with that, thank you. I appreciate this time. I appreciate you letting us take the proverbial handoff baton from Mary. And so with our vendor partnerships over the many years, valuing their expertise and their ability to keep state-of-the-art tools and our recommendations to bring them forward, I greatly appreciate. So thank you for allowing us to be of service to, most importantly, your great employees. So with that, I'd like to open up for any questions if we have time, and if not, we'll certainly be available later on.
Thank you. We'll go on to item 7, which is committee discussion and action. Item A is the Finance Committee. We have the budget report, which...
Are we having a meeting after this or not?
We're having just a meeting with Joe after this to discuss it, and I think we're just saying as presented, and we're continuing to work at it. Joe, do you have anything you want to add?
Just that we're getting pretty close, and I would anticipate that in the month of June, we'll go into detailed discussions about what it's going to take to have a balanced budget for the county. So we're getting close.
I did want to talk about buying some more buildings, but we can do that later.
With that, item 2, the corrections budget request for fiscal year 18-19. Director Foxall.
Good afternoon. Good morning, Commissioners. Yeah, almost afternoon. Good morning, Commissioners. Presentation today will be the budget for the fiscal year 18-19, and I am going to have our Fiscal Services Administrator lead us off, and then I will fill in afterwards. So, Amber Redmond.
Good morning, Amber Redmond, the Administrative Services Manager at Douglas County Department of Corrections. I'll be co-presenting with Mark today on our overall budget request for 2019. We've kind of rearranged the order of things. Historically, Mark presents the data and trend and narrative behind our request. This year, we're going to jump straight to the numbers. I'll provide you guys with a summary of our request, and then he'll provide some trend and data information to support our request. With that said, jumping straight to the numbers, here's a summary of our overall budget request. I don't think we can do it anything from here. Did you guys get a copy of the budget presentation?
Do we have one on the computer?
It's a lot of data to try and put on one slide. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Okay, so here's an overall summary of our budget request for 2019. We are over target, which is what brings us in front of you today. The target that was set for the Department of Corrections was just over $440,000. Our overall budget request is coming in $956,282 over last year's approved budget, making us just over $515,000 over our target that was set for the Department of Corrections. One note about that target request, if we would have made no changes to our overall budget request at all, we would not have hit that target amount, just simply due to the annual staffing salary increases and step increases that we can project out for the next budget year. In this budget request, we are not asking for any additional staff members. So again, if we would have made no other changes to our budget, we would have been unable to hit the target amount set for the Department of Corrections. Looking at that first line, the personal services line, you can see an overall difference of $263,000. That's a combination of a couple of things. That is the annual salary increases and step increases projected out for the next budget year, minus an attrition amount. That's a practice that we do every year. It's actually a deduction that we make in our overall budget request. We are coming in with a stronger attrition number this year. Historically, we deduct 2% of the jail personal services costs to account for an attrition. That's the staff turnover. This year we are deducting our budget request by 4% to account for that attrition, and that's simply us acknowledging how short-staffed we are and the amount of time that it's going to take for us to hire individuals to get up to our authorized staffing numbers. So there's a 4% deduction in the jail personal services line to account for attrition. The rest of our increase falls in the following categories: the purchase services, supplies, and equipment. And what I want to do is just highlight the major drivers of some of those increases. So second to the step increases and annual raises that I just pointed out, the next major expense in our budget request does come from our medical budget. We are preparing for a price increase within our medical contract, and Mark's going to provide some more data and trend information on what's driving that anticipation. We, within the medical budget, we also increased the funding amount for overcap. That's the payments on invoices that the county is responsible for, that when we receive a medical invoice for some services that were administered, if it comes in over cap, the amount that we've negotiated within our medical contract, we are responsible for those costs. We're seeing an increase in those costs, so we're trying to account for that next year. We offered a small increase for the medical costs associated with safekeeper inmates held at other facilities. And we also inserted a budget line item to cover some funding on a teleclinic system that we just started looking at. Mark can provide you with some more information on that. The next major budget increase item comes from our key and tool department, and that's simply a result of the bond that was approved by voters from last year. One of the major funding pieces in that bond last year was a replacement of our entire radio system. Our radio system was identified as end of life. The bond was approved and allowed us to do a complete replacement of that system last year. So we were able to eliminate all costs from our budget last year associated with the radio equipment. Now that that's been accomplished, this is us just inserting some items back into our budget request to allow for maintenance and replacement costs. That's a totally normal request within our budget. That's really an overall summary of some of the expense requirements. Mark's going to present to you some of the data and trend narrative, and then we'll close out the presentation on our revenue projections.
Thought that was me. Commissioners, you have before you our ADP, or average daily population. I've come before you on several months now to speak to our population and the rising cost of our average daily population, which is also driving the budget for 18-19. If you take a look at the 2014 number and the 2015 number, and then look at the rapid expansion of our population from 16 to 17, and our population continues to grow, and that's one of the drivers for the budget, both with respect to the staffing that we need, and also with respect to the mental health needs. We've got more people coming in, acuity level, their medical acuity level, their mental health acuity level are higher than I've ever seen before, and we have to respond to it. With respect to sentence and pretrial population, you can see the explosion of the pretrial population as well. You can see what's going on in 15, and you can see a rapid rise of the pretrial population. The sentence population has been trending downward. However, the pretrial population has continued to trend upward, and in 2018, the pretrial population continues to trend upward. I want to call to your attention, you know what? I'm so sorry. I'm working off my paper slides. That's a sentence and pretrial population graphic for you. And I want to call to your attention the average length of stay, which is also a driver of our population. So not only do we have more people coming in, they're also staying longer. And I take that back to one of the driving factors of that, some mental health, of the acuity of the mentally ill population coming into our facility. But you take a look at the average length of stay, and you can see the rising numbers for the average length of stay, particularly going across the board from 2012, 2013, 2014, 15, 16, 17. The overall average length of stay continues to rise, particularly for the males, a slight downward trend for the females, but overall, our average length of stay continues to rise. Now, there's a particular caveat to that. Our average length of stay, as I said, is about 25 days. However, approximately 45% of our population is here less than 72 hours. Okay? If a person is here more than 72 hours, the average length of stay goes to about 2 months. So you back out those 45%, then you take a look at our average length of stay, and it expands to 2 months. So clearly, more people coming in, they're more sick, they're more mentally ill, and they're staying a whole lot longer. I also call to your attention our custodial sanctions. This is a product of LB 605, and I've spoken to this in the past. These are custodial sanction bed days. The probation utilizing our facility for the custodial sanction or probation violators. We began really in earnest tracking those, and I had staff run numbers back from January of 2017, and you can see the rising trend of the custodial sanction bed days. It's trending upwards. In April of 2018, we had 360 custodial sanction bed days. And these numbers are still in the winter, too. I also call your attention to custodial sanction days with respect to inmates serving custodial sanctions. And you can see the trend there, looking back to January 2017 and to where we are in May of 2018. The next graphic I provided for you that depicts our rising population of the violation of probation inmates, also a product of LB 605. Take a look at to the extreme left of the chart. April of 14, we're about 20 VOP days. Take a look at April of 2018, and you can see we're at about 120. Whereas a few years ago, it's 7 or 8 housing units closed, everything's open.
They violated their own custodial sanction while they were home there.
These are violation of probations, not to be confused with custodial sanction days.
Okay. So.
Separate chart.
Okay. But they're not to be tied, okay.
These are people. These are bodies in a bed in a housing unit.
So you couldn't be on custodial sanction. If you were on custodial sanction, you wouldn't be out. You'd be sitting there anyway, so that's not okay. Okay. You know what I'm just curious what those charges are that are being violated? What's the majority of them?
It's an array of things. It could be a technical violation. It could be new charges. It could be an abscond. It could be, for example, not meeting with your probation officer in a timely manner. Any number of things.
Commissioner Moore.
I'd like to ask if I've got some questions coming up too. But this one, can we ask a judge? A judge is the person they sends them over to you, right? That's who.
No, this comes from probation.
Okay, can we ask probation to ask the judge to pay us for keeping these people? Can we file get the county attorney to represent us and go to court and say, we want to be paid for keeping these people?
I would have to research that.
I think we ought to. I mean, what the hell? We could, get a court order for the state to pay us. That's where we ought to go. Yeah.
And I didn't want to start a chain reaction. I just was curious what that was. So you got some questions, but when you continue, you got a whole row. So.
Okay, I won't interrupt you anymore.
Okay, almost done. Although I could speak for hours on this, but I know I was given a time limit. So I bring to you the chart that you are quite familiar with, and it's our mental health acuity pyramid. And you can see this is still a difficult area for us, particularly the top two parts of that pyramid, which represent seriously mentally ill in our facility. Again, driving the population, intake, driving the average length of stay as well. And make no mistake about it, this is, and I've spoken to this in the past, is this area of medical is an extreme challenge for us. Mental health diagnoses. You've seen this chart before. I provide this in my monthly report, and you can see the adjustment disorders up. You can see the trending for bipolar is up. These are just the depression, PTSD, anxiety, ADHD, all of the different things that the staff, both medical and custody, have to respond to in a jail environment. The mental health indicators, you see our average daily population, and you can see that trending up. It's very high this winter. You can see the total number of inmates diagnosed with mental illness continuing to trend up. And you can see the total number of diagnoses within the jail facility trending up. Overall chronic care for us is trending up. And there's hypertension, diabetes, dental, all of those things we're trying to respond to. Alcohol withdrawal, trending up. Opiate withdrawal, trending up. Prescription medicine, trending up. Psychotropic medication, trending up. So I drill down a little bit more into the population and what's going on, and I speak to this in a little bit summary fashion at the monthly meetings, but this gives you a little bit more detail as to the things that we're experiencing as our population continues to rise. And it's just not merely about a number increase for us, but all the different things that come with the increasing numbers. Amber, would you like to finish with the revenue? Unless you want me to finish with the revenue, then we'll field all questions afterwards.
The revenue projections are pretty simple. Our revenue projections, while our expense side of the budget is up, the revenue projections are down. They're pretty conservative projections. We're anticipating a drop in our revenue by about $816,000. And that's simply a result of us having to kick out our paying customers to accommodate for the other city and state inmates. The primary losses we anticipate being associated with the U.S. Marshal inmate, ICE inmates. We have had some internal discussions about renegotiating that per diem rate on those two contracts. We've been hesitant to explore that option in the past 5 years, but we really feel like we're in a position to start having those conversations with the U.S. Marshals and ICE. And then I think we had some plans to take a look at some of the house arrest equipment charges that we relay on to the clients, that's another expense item that has continued to trend upward, and we really have done nothing to renegotiate the costs that we charge to inmates on those pieces of equipment. So we do have some plans to try and make up for the loss of revenue that we project, but that's it.
That brings us to a conclusion of the PowerPoint presentation. Are there questions?
Commissioner Morgan, Kavanaugh, Boyle, that's all I saw.
Okay, I wanted to mention, I know we have some litigation, and hopefully you'll stay for that executive session after this. When you said that, you know, they're there for that longer period, the number of days that you're holding, is that because they're not able to get to court as quickly, or?
It has to do with inability to make bond, or they just can't afford bond, or there's no bond.
Okay, and I
Enter a
know,
plea, and they remain on a cash bond, and they just await their day in court.
and I know that Commissioner Rogers has been kind of leading the way there, that we're looking at that to try to make some improvements and see what we can do on that. Commissioner Boyle's been involved in that, and I think all of us have talked about it. So how the overtime is still a pretty significant factor also, I assume, in your budgeting this year?
It's still a significant factor until we can get back up to staffing
Okay.
levels.
And I really am appreciative of the extra effort everyone there is trying to make toward resolving some of the seriousness and issues that you have there personnel-wise, and the hours and some of the things that they face each and every day. I also believe on June 2nd, if I'm correct, we have a graduation here at 10 a.m., if I'm recalling the right date for a graduation here in the LC chamber. Is that correct?
First or the second, I think it is the second at 10 o'clock, yes.
Either Thursday or Friday. I think it was on Friday morning that we have that, and I plan to attend that.
Thank you.
And I think that's all I have.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. You have on the requested budget page some items in there that I just need a little clarification on. So the first item is labeled as personal services, and the difference is over budgeted 17-18 and requested 18-19, 263,000. Does that, I guess personnel services would be another way of putting that, mean that's what the anticipated increase in compensation to Douglas County Corrections employees will be in that budget year?
Yeah, the personal services line is all salary projections. It contains staff salaries, longevity, overtime,
okay,
all of those payroll type items.
So the difference basically is a little under $1 million, and so a quarter of that is this personnel costs, and the other 75% is other stuff. And the big one that jumps out at me is purchased services, 435,000. It's about half of the difference there. So under purchased services, what falls under that category?
Those are a lot of our contracts, and the primary increase within that category is going to be that medical contract. Our medical budget was up just over $411,000 from last year. Yeah, about $412,000 in the medical category.
And are we out on RFP for medical budget, or for a medical provider now? Is that correct?
Not currently. Our current medical contract extends through the end of September.
Okay, but it expires this year, right? Okay.
Yes, it does.
So there'll be an RFP for that contract sometime this year?
That's correct.
Okay. So in the original contract, and I think they're, what, 4 or 5 years long?
Yeah, the initial was 3 years.
5 and 2. 3 and 2.
I think it's 3 and 2.
I think it predates me coming on the board anyhow. I don't remember us discussing that when it was originally initiated. But did it have a provision in there that said so much a year, but then you can go over by, $500,000 or something? How does that work? What's the mechanism there where that overage occurs?
I don't know.
If you don't know,
what
that's
overage
fine.
you're
I don't know
referring
either. That's why I'm asking.
If we run over in the contract, then we have to pull that money from our budget line. So if we run over, if we go over what our allotted expenditures are in the medical area, we just have to we have to spend it, what's in our line. It comes from our line. Or have to come back before the board and ask for more money.
Okay, but am I understanding right that the provision of medical services to our population exceeded what we thought we would have to spend in this budget year?
We're preparing for that, yes.
We're anticipating that?
Yes.
Okay. So these differences are anticipated differences going forward. And the big jump, I guess, percentage-wise, I mean, you have dollars and then you have percentages. So that was a big jump dollar-wise. A big jump percentage-wise is supplies, which are anticipating a 113% increase in supplies. It's 124,000. But what's the anticipated increase in the supply need there?
A major driver of that it's between both the supplies and the equipment line. A lot of that is attributed back to that tool and key budget that I referred to. Some of those items we were able to totally eliminate from our budget request last year because of the bond. It provided for a total replacement of a lot of those items. Now that that's been accomplished, we have to start inserting some of those light items back into our budget to allow for our maintenance and replacement costs, which is why it's such a high percentage amount, even though it's really not much for dollars.
Sure. So that's communication equipment primarily, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of the supply items, in addition to tool and key, is just the amount of supplies, sanitation supplies. When we have more inmates, we use more supplies.
Okay. So the difference that you're anticipating is just under $1 million over last year's budget. And half of that is anticipation, roughly anticipating increased medical cost needs. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
That's the single biggest component of this.
Second to the annual raises and step increases that we do know of and can project out for next year. Yep.
Okay. So when we get down to the revenue page, I note that there are three primary categories that contribute to this projected $1 million decrease in revenues. So the first is other grants, where in 17-18 we budgeted $589,000 plus dollars, and in 18-19 we budget $0.
Yeah, that single line item is the Sherwood grant that we received. The Sherwood grant was a 3-year grant, correct? That the revenue payments from the grant of that agreement are finished.
Okay.
So the terms of that grant are done.
And what was that grant funding? What activities?
That grant funded our reentry specialists. And a reentry specialist, it funded, those are the social workers that I've talked about in the past. We brought into the facility to work in the housing units to identify needs of the inmates. That's also the group of individuals who for several months participated in a survey of 6,000 plus inmates coming into the facility to identify needs as those individuals came in, so we could properly craft a response to insofar as what those individuals would be doing for their work, what training, what programming they would provide, what resources on the outside they could provide, what in-housing unit instruction they could provide, if we need to go out and ask for more money to address some of those needs, such as housing, transportation, mental health, vocational rehabilitation, things of that nature.
Okay, so it's an intake specialist, and then there's follow-up social work inside the population?
Yes.
And this was a 3-year grant, is that correct?
3 years.
And do you anticipate, putting this in as a full-time position in corrections?
I do, and I will say that the feedback that we've received thus far as those individuals have been deployed to the housing units has been very good. I'm very excited about what they've been able to do in housing units, and not only would I like to keep what we have, but I would like to expand that program.
Okay. And if you were to put that in as a permanent component of Douglas County funded component of your budget, how many FTEs would that be? How many employees are we talking about?
I don't anticipate that until the 1920 budget.
How many?
I don't anticipate, I didn't put any in right now because Grant's covering that for 18-19, but 7.
There are 7 working under the Sherwood grant?
Yes.
Okay. Then you mentioned that another big chunk of this $1 million decrease in revenues is from housing ICE detainees.
U.S. Marshal and ICE.
And U.S. Marshal. So under this, it has jail housing city, I presume that's Omaha, and jail housing ICE, that's the ICE, jail housing SSA, and jail housing other. Is the Marshal and ICE together, or is Marshal?
Separate.
Okay, so the Marshal is the other category?
No, USN. Yeah, they're a little spread apart on the presentation. It's the third one down, accounts for the U.S. Marshal inmates.
Okay, I see it. Okay, thank you. And those decreases in revenues, is that driven by the fact that we're overcrowded with what we've got already? We can't accommodate the bodies?
That's correct.
Okay. And when you said that you're not asking for any new resources for additional personnel, that doesn't mean that you're not constantly trying to recruit new people to.
That's correct also.
I think our current posting for Douglas County Corrections is something like 40 corrections officers.
Exactly. We increased our staff last year. If I can get to the number of staff that we increased last year, that should put us in pretty good shape.
How many did we increase last year?
It's about 21.
Okay. But we could still use 40 more to be
Yes.
adequately staffed.
Because we're down 40.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have this chronic, high population, understaffing situation. Is that what I'm hearing here? It's chronic.
Yes, sir.
It's ongoing.
Yes, sir.
And it's bad.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle.
Well, I know you're trying to get that up, but it's difficult hiring, I know that it is. I wanted to ask you, why are these people staying longer? You brought that up on one of these slides.
Yes. I think our pretrial, excuse me a second.
I'd give you the page number, but it's not numbered.
My error. Sorry about that.
It's all right. What's the penalty for that, Mary Ann?
No money? Okay. If you look at the sentence and pretrial population.
Average length of stay.
It's
I mean, it's pretty high to begin with. It has been for a long time.
why are they staying longer? Because the pretrial population is driving our numbers, okay? Average length of stay is driving the numbers, so more people are coming in. They're coming in pretrial, and they're staying longer.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of those factors. And those individuals who are coming in on pretrial are on some type of bond and one or more charges.
Okay, and I know that you're trying to get them out of there with early efforts to get them charged and out of there early, but I didn't realize this, the average length of stay was approaching 25 days.
Well, actually,
is that what it
longer
is?
than that if you go to the next slide. And that explanation that I provided, it's about 25 days, but if you pull out 45% of the population who are here less than 72 hours, then that average length of stay jumps to 2 months.
Yeah, right, I know that. we've got to figure out a way to interrupt that. I mean, I don't know what it is, but are they people accused of felonies?
Some, yes. Felonies, misdemeanors, and it's again, violations of probations, things of that nature. It's a
You know, violations of probation, I mean, really putting them in jail, what does that accomplish, you know? I mean, I don't understand it. What's the, you know, what was the charge in the first place that got them probation, you know, speeding?
It could be a theft, it could be a drug charge. We're certainly seeing a rise in drug-addicted people coming in, particularly methamphetamine. We're beginning to see a rise in opiates addictions coming in. That's something we've noticed as well.
Well, I think we need to get them treatment, not, you know, get them off their drugs instead of, you know, there needs to be somebody, not you, but someone else needs to be paying attention to what's happening to these people. And I think they're probably, in today's atmosphere, I don't think anybody gives a damn about them, to tell you the truth.
We are heavily impacted by what's going on in society, and then we become the repository for everything.
Yeah.
And we're trying to address it, and that's one of the reasons we were able to seek the grant and put people in place to try to assess the needs of the population coming in. And we're trying to adapt as fast as we can, but what's going on in society is turning a lot faster than we can adapt.
Yeah.
But we're trying.
And I understand that. I'm not laying this at your doorstep.
Sure, I
It's
understand.
very bothersome to see this happen. I mean, for the people and for you. On the custodial sanction days, it's gone up, and who drives that? I mean, who are these people, and
Those, again, that's custodial
people?
sanction bed days. Custodial sanction bed days emanate from probation.
I'm sorry?
They emanate from probation.
Okay. Well, I think we need to figure out what we can do about that.
And we're working on that. We've been working with probation to try to get probation officers housed in our facility to try to meet with these individuals and hopefully get them out faster and onto some type of programming underway.
And you know, you had there was a story about the efforts that you and the public defender, county attorney are working on with the judges to try to do some things. And it really does come down to the judges, which is what we've talked about before. I'm really concerned about that because I don't know whether, you know, what's the status on that, or can you, this is a little bit off the track, but.
We have a meeting today. We had a meeting last week. The ongoing meetings, I think Mike Myers is in the final stages of preparing to launch the pilot. And it's not just the judges, but as I said at the Criminal Justice Management Council meetings, this addressing the concerns with the pre-trial population are going to take the criminal justice involvement of the criminal justice community, which is why we're speaking with not only the judges but the prosecutors and the public defenders, and we'll talk to probation as well and the city prosecutor.
Okay.
And it really takes a collective effort of the criminal justice community to try to put a dent in this pre-trial population. It's not just one entity, which is why Mike's speaking to so many different, Mike and his staff are speaking to so many different entities before we launch.
One of these pages has the mental health diagnoses, and you know, there is Marianne Borgeson brought back an idea along with others from Oakland, California, about a psychiatric emergency room, which isn't necessarily related to this, but that's coming down the pike that should help somewhat. There's an RFP out for services through Region 6, I believe, so that'll be coming pretty soon. I'd like to say to you, from my money, and I think I can maybe speak for others, I'm not going to, but I think what you need to do on this page, the mental health diagnoses, and the next page, indicators, I think you need to budget for treatment. I think we've finally come to the point where we can no longer just, you know, and I understand the pressure that you're under, but I don't think we can continue to throw this burden onto you, where you have what percentage of inmates suffering from some sort of mental illness?
55, 60%.
Okay.
Or more.
So, as you've said many times, you're running the largest mental health facility in the state. I think what we need to do is budget for it and figure out if we need to get an addition onto the health center, or get an addition onto the jail, and build a mental health facility. We have to quit talking about it. I mean, we've got to solve this. We all know it's a problem. And, other communities have done that. I just saw something on television, I don't know what town it was, but on the East Coast, somebody is built a magnificent mental health hospital next to the jail, and that's where their people go. So anyway, I intend to talk to you in detail and others who are more knowledgeable than I am about mental health services, most notably Commissioner Borgeson and Commissioner Rogers, for starters, and see what we can do to come up with a solution and fund it. I think we have to fund it, and it's not going to be cheap. And I think this means a property tax increase, and there's a couple other things that I think we're going to have to face. I think hiring 6 people at 911 is another big priority. So we need to, but you're at the top of the list, along with sharing the space with 911 on coming to grips with what has to happen. So I think we ought to talk about funding it, I really do. And I want to thank both of you and your staff for the presentation today. It is a little bit unreadable, but that's okay. I already contacted Leah and said we need to get a hold of the people who prepare these slides and convert them. But for the people at home particularly, I don't think they can read it. But anyhow, but I do want to thank you for your leadership over there. You've done just a terrific job and assembled the right kind of people with the right kind of attitude. So I appreciate it. You're really doing what I certainly want to see done. So thank you.
Just 2 quick things. How much of the personnel services of that 263,000 is overtime?
We actually stuck with the same overtime projections as we had in our budget requests from last year. It's a really conservative overtime amount. Get you the exact dollar amount here in a second. No, I don't have the overall summary amount. It's broken out into the other categories. I can follow up
That's
with that
okay.
number for you.
Yeah, if you could maybe just give me the last maybe 3 years of what the overtime numbers are, that would be good. And then to Commissioner Boyle's comments about mental health services within corrections, I would like to see the historical increases in dollars spent, because we've increased our mental health staff over there. We increased a couple of LMPHs and APRN. We have a psychiatrist. At one time we increased his hours or their hours. That probably needs to be chatted about a little bit. But I want to see what those increases have been from maybe the last 5 years. It might even go back farther, but let's start with the last 5 years of what we've increased. And then just a heads up, because we've been talking about, Commissioner Duda and I have been involved in some pretty serious conversations with the state and our civil protective custody program down at Catholic Charities, in which the state does not want to fund anymore unless we are licensed, and in order to get licensed we have to be accredited, and we are accredited currently as a facility, which will allow us to add those civil protective custody beds to that license. But if the state decides currently or within 2 years they're not going to fund us anymore, I will guarantee you that those folks will go to the emergency rooms, or they will be charged, and we will be back bringing them to the jail. And we've reverted back. Mark, you were on the streets many years ago. So just I tell you that we're working hard on that. We don't want that to happen. But just so you know that discussion is happening, and I'm optimistic that we'll find a resolution, but just be prepared for that. Sometimes I get a little bit depressed, really, about how backwards we're going in society with services, especially for those with mental illness and serious mental illness. If you look back in the 80s, individuals were housed for well over 72 days on an average in beds getting treatment, and we now put them in an acute setting, just inpatient. That doesn't even really count as the intensive care units. They're in inpatients for less than 7 days. Unacceptable. And what's happening is we're criminalizing it, and they're ending up in our jails. So I just want to see what we've spent and how we've increased or what we've done to do that. Service over at the jail and have those discussions about what we can do. Thank you.
I've said this since I first got involved in politics in 1997. If you don't fund it, it ain't going to happen. If you don't fund it, it ain't going to happen. And this is for the citizens of Omaha and Douglas County and all throughout the country. If you don't fund it, it's going to fall by the wayside, and it's going to cost you more. Going to cost you a lot more. LB 605. Any idea what that has affected our costs?
That's a very difficult number to get our hands around.
I want an answer now.
No. which is
I'm
we
kidding.
try to piecemeal out the cost, which is why I'm giving you violation of probation numbers, giving you custodial sanction numbers, but bed days. But there were so many different things in that bill that are impacting us. Those that we can get our hands around the data are the two biggest, most visible hits to the population. But there's more.
Yeah, and I hope the public knows I was kidding by the tone of voice there. And we've asked you that before, and you've explained it to us, how difficult it is. You can't get your arms around it because it's complex. But we do know, in general, it's costing us a lot of money, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Years ago, the solution sounded so easy. You know, get tough on crime, lock them up, throw away the key. And that wasn't a good idea. I was never for that. You know, somebody's not going to repent in 1 year any more likely than they are in 5 years. As a matter of fact, I understand after 3 years in a correctional facility, the likelihood of recidivism increases. Is that correct?
It does.
Okay.
The longer you're away from the community and opportunities to better yourself diminishes the likelihood of a successful return.
And you were talking about the pilot program. Any idea when that might start being implemented? I know it's not resolved yet, but
I'd like to see it up and running in June.
I'd like to see it yesterday, but that's just my thought. June, that'd be good.
Yes, sir.
I did a quick math at $93 a day, 60-day average length of stay. That's about $5,600 to house an inmate for those 60 days. Any idea what treatment costs?
I do not know what treatment costs would be.
If anybody out there in the public or anywhere can give me an idea what it costs to treat somebody for some of these various mental health issues, on an average, I'd like to know.
Well, that depends on what the
Well, I know
what the diagnosis is. You're talking about
Well, that's
substance
kind of why-
abuse. You're talking about mental health. You're talking
And
about
I'm talking about all of
disorders.
them. I'm not
Sure.
talking about one figure. I'm looking at for each one individually. What is the average cost of treating somebody who has alcoholism?
Sure.
Somebody who has schizophrenia, et cetera, et cetera. I realize schizophrenia is going to be very expensive because of the medications. But we're paying the medication anyways. Well, what is the counseling cost? The constant hand-holding to say, hey, remember to take your medicine. Think of others and how you're affecting them and what they're thinking of you when you're off your pills. You know, let's all work together to make this world a better place. I'm done.
Commissioner Morgan.
I wanted to allow, in case Joe had a question, Joe Lorenz, our finance director, had a question. I think he'd like to ask.
Yeah,
before
not
anything
not
else.
so much a question, but just a little
caveat to these numbers. In the personnel services, you can see that it was only up 1.2%, and one of the key factors that's really going to impact that in the coming years, this doesn't include the FOP 8 settlement. When that is hopefully finally settled upon, and with the retroactive payment, that's going to be a significant increase to the personnel services cost for corrections.
Okay, that's it.
Commissioner Borgeson.
I just wanted to offer to Commissioner Kraft that I can get you what the contracts are paid per, if you'd like, and that would give you a list out of all of the services and what they cost.
That'd be fantastic, thank you.
Right. I see no more questions, Mark. Anything you all want to add or close?
No, I'll end today
Thank
at
you.
this time.
All right. With that, we'll go to letter D in community services, and item 1 is consideration of action to dissolve the Douglas County Fair Board. Commissioner Kraft, this is your committee.
Okay. With some other commissioners, I've been discussing what is the purpose of the Fair Board now that we have a contract to run the fair. And we've discovered that you can't pay a Fair Board even the amount of money we need to pay them to publish the public notification if we're funding a fair through a contracted organization. So the Fair Board really has no function and has no authority. And we have a Fair Advisory Board, excuse me, we have a Fair Advisory Board that the current Fair Board members have been invited to sit on, and only a few of them are sitting on it. But they're still welcome to come and participate as an advisory board. But, you know, we have no function for the Fair Board, they have no authority, so now's the time to dissolve the board. We've had trouble getting committee members. We usually don't have a quorum at their meetings. So I would make a motion to dissolve.
You can second his.
Oh, okay, did you make it 10 years ago? I will second it. I thought you guys were making fun of me. You're making fun of Mike?
The faces he's making next to you. He is just having way too much fun with this.
So just to note for the record, the motion is by Commissioner Boyle, the second is by Commissioner Kraft. Commissioner Dudas first.
Mostly I've been wanting to work with Mike on something on the fair for a long time, and this is finally our opportunity. This is a transition that's been a good year in the making. We are very pleased that there is a good new home for the Douglas County Fair with the Friends of Extension Board be willing to take it on with no property tax dollars going into it. But our Fair Board really had three events that they did every year. They did the Trail Challenge out at Lake Cunningham. That's just going to take a rest for a year. It may come back, but it will not be by the Fair Association. The people that have been doing it, if they want to continue doing it, they'll have the opportunity. But at least for this year, that's taking a rest. But the bigger deal is the youth rodeo. They've had a very successful high school championship rodeo for a couple of years as a part of the fair. And that is not what the Friends of Extension, I mean, they said, we'll take over the fair. Well, that leaves the youth rodeo kind of hanging out there in limbo, and the direction that is heading. And these are still some loose ends that have got to be tied together going down the road. But that looks like it's going to be joining up with, there's a new PCR rodeo. Our old friends Schoenberg, Butch Lindley, Beth Greiner, the pros that know how to put a rodeo on, are getting back to putting a rodeo on. And they are willing to, as a part of that, take on a youth rodeo if we get some hotel motel dollars with it. So that looks like the direction that's going to head is a partnership with a rodeo rather than with the fair. And it'll still probably be some of the same people helping organize it. Now, some of the loose ends we have to tie together is that funding is under the name of the Douglas County Fair Association. That's the nonprofit that will be sponsoring the youth rodeo. And we need to pursue a name change at some point. For once, I'm actually agreeing with Commissioner Boyle that we need to be careful what things say Douglas County on them. You know, I want to get the name Douglas County out of that nonprofit eventually, but that's cumbersome. That's paperwork with the Secretary of State and all that. So those are some of the loose ends we'll still be working for. But I'm very pleased at the direction the fair is heading. This is a culmination of a lot of work, and to the best of my knowledge, everybody is okay and comfortable with this action that they know we are contemplating. Thank you.
Call the question. Just kidding.
Commissioner Boyle.
Yes.
I have really, at everyone else's expense, I've had a lot of, I guess, fun jostling with you, but you have done a terrific job getting this together on a serious note, and I think it's definitely headed in the right direction. And I really congratulate you on dealing with the problems in a very straightforward way. And so, in all seriousness, I congratulate you for putting this together. Good job.
Commissioner Kraft.
The fair is now going to be under the auspices of the Friends of Extension. And it's going to be July 4th at Village Point. 14th. July 14th, I'm sorry. I couldn't see my notes here. There will be an interesting parade from where Best Buy is all the way to the movie theater down the main street. They're envisioning a Disney-style parade. Village Point has been generous enough to give us access to empty storefronts, so we will have many exhibits inside. There will be some outside. We are working with Metro Community College for parking, and we're still trying to create an agreement with Chance Ridge for various events. The people running the Friends of Extension and the fair, I think, are doing an excellent job, well organized, and I think this year will be good. It'll be rough, but it'll be good, and I think next year will be great. Claire, Claire's been working with me on this.
You summed it up well.
Okay, thank you.
There is a motion and a second. No further questions, please vote.
Motion passes, all voting yes.
All right, letter G is Human Resources. Item 1 is the weekly personnel report, and it is as received. Item 2 is legislative issues, which there are none to my attention. So there is a need for an executive session for litigation, personnel, and real estate. Anything else? You got something else? No. Okay. There's a motion by Commissioner Morgan, a second by Commissioner Boyle to go into executive session. Please vote.
Motion passes, all voting yes.
And again, the executive session is for litigation, personnel, and real estate.
And everyone's a yes, Mark's a yes. Okay, motion passes, all present voting yes.